All right, welcome everyone to Amatic's webinar on how to write a cover letter for getting a job at a two-year college. John, I'm going to share my screen, or do you want to share yours?
Oh, you know what? I have no problem sharing mine. So let me just put it in the slideshow mode. So
Okay.
here, here we go. So if somebody can't see it, just let me know.
All right, so we're introducing yourself to the committee about cover letters. Again, this is put on by Amatic. My name is Catherine Kozak. I am the immediate past president of Amatic, and I teach mathematics at Coconino Community College in Flagstaff, Arizona. John?
Oh, yes, and I'm John Oakes, and I have been involved with Amatic for quite some time. I was the Midwest vice president, and before that, the professional development coordinator. And I teach math at Macomb Community College in Warren, Michigan. That's about 20 minutes north of Detroit.
Yeah, and I should mention that Flagstaff, Arizona is 70 miles from the Grand Canyon, and we're at 7,000 feet, and I'm right now watching 2 feet of snow come down. So, all right. So we wanted to talk to you about why do you write a cover letter and who needs to do a cover letter. And they're basically a cover letter is to introduce yourself to the committee. That's really what its job is let the committee know who you are. They're a narrative that complements your resume. And I actually don't mind if it says some of the same things that your resume says, because it gets it all in one place and in one location. But I know some people also say we shouldn't duplicate what's in your resume, but I like to actually highlight what's in my resume so that the people know this is really what is important for my resume. Also say, why do you want the job? Why are you trying to get a job with wherever you're getting hired with? And one of the things I object to is that people sit there and say they just want a job with a community college or they want to live in Flagstaff, which is one of the things we hear a lot. And that's not a real good thing. Try to say that you want to work at that college, that one specifically. John, do you want to say anything?
So I I agree with what Kate said, and I will say that when we get to a few of the later slides, I'll say where I think it might be good to add some highlights of your resume in to the cover letter. It definitely shouldn't be a complete repeat of your resume, but there are some places where it might be better to add those highlights than others.
And then you should tell people what your personality is about. One thing about your cover letter and your resume, is that it should be written to the position description. So every job when it's done has what the position's about. So John's going to show you some of the position descriptions that exist right now. Amatic has a job board. This is the link to that job board. And it shows you kind of what jobs are available right now, when they're going to be posted, when they have to be filed and so forth. And so John, if you want to just pick one of those, we can go into and talk about what that looks
Well,
like.
you know what? I feel like I should go with one in my home state.
All right.
So,
I was gonna go with my home state, but since you're driving it, I'll have to go with yours. Okay. Um, so everyone is different. So John, can you go back real fast to that job board before we go through this? One thing I should point out is that each one of these colleges has, and John said he wanted to go to the one in his home state, and that's because each one has their own personality. What is happening at my community college is very different than what's happening at John's community college, is very different than what's happening at any of these other ones. Glendale Community College is actually, this is the one that's in Arizona, is actually part of the Maricopa system. Maricopa system has 10 community colleges in their system. It's a huge system. Pennsylvania College of Technology, that's actually most likely not a community college. It's probably a little different than that. And so each one has its own personality, and you kind of want to find out what that personality is when you're going to apply. And that comes to us, some of that comes out in the position description. So if you go back to the Grand Rapids position description, this is usually telling you kind of what it is, how do they want you to apply, information about that. So this is very important to read this, but it also will give you an idea of what background do they want, who do they want to have, what do they want to see in this. They also give, in this one, they actually say how many personal references they want you to have. And they want some other information. Go ahead.
Sorry, Kate. Although I will say that this isn't, this definitely isn't an intro level position of provost.
No, this is not. So let's go to one that's a little bit more intro level, because none of us, I'm not going to apply for provost. So
let's see. Let's
pick on Glendale.
Glendale.
Yes.
So
this is Glendale's notification that they're doing it. They have several positions in mathematics. And they want to get you, they give you the idea that they are a larger campus. Glendale Community College has, I don't know, I think 20,000 students. So it is a really big college. It gives you a little bit of idea who they are. So they're still not giving us a position description though. This is more just about who they are and what's going on. So let's go find a different one, John. I should have looked at these sooner.
Let's see. So let's Columbus State.
Yes. My
so
school,
this one is directly on their website. So
yes, so perfect. So this is where you want to go, and it gives you an idea. So first of it gives you an idea of who they are, what department you're going to be in. Is it board approved? Go ahead.
Although this might not be an entry level position either, because it's chairperson.
Yeah. Okay. Let's find another one, John.
So
let's go to Northwest.
Actually, that would be good to put on the website is what the position is. Yes. I didn't ever think about this until now. So this looks like it might be.
Yes, this one is definitely looks like it is. Okay. So it gives you an idea of who they're looking for. They want you to, what they want you to teach, what classes they want you to teach. So if you've taught any of these classes, it would be really good to mention those classes in your resume and your cover letter. That, hey, I taught these classes. These are my experience. If you haven't taught these classes, it would be good to talk about how excited you are to teach a class at this level. So if you're not a statistics person, but they want someone who can teach statistics, then you might want to put in, you know, I would look in, I'd love to see the new job and what that would be and how to teach that course. So this one actually looks like they're basically listing every course in their discipline that you could be teaching. Then they also talk about if you go up just a slight bit, what they want you to have a master's in mathematics. They want you to have 3 years of teaching experience, 2 years of, and these are your minimums. So these are what you must have in order to apply for this one.
And I'll say this isn't necessarily an entry level position either, since it says faculty level 3. But so like the 2 years full-time teaching experience wouldn't apply to just all teaching positions out there.
Though I will say, like at my school, we actually do want to see 2 years or 3 years before we will hire you full-time at my school. So every school is different, so you need to look at that. And we do count part-time faculty teaching as part of that. So it's okay if you've only taught part-time, you can put that down. One thing is, even if you don't meet the minimum quals, sometimes it's not a bad idea to put them in, because the HR directors may decide you do meet the minimum qualifications. These minimum abilities, these are things, again, you should highlight these. I do teach this way. How do I teach? What are my teaching values doing? The competitive salary, I would look at that. I would look at what their salary is, that they're going with. Because like my school, the salaries are pretty competitive, but you can't afford to live here. So you want to make sure that you look at that and see what is the cost of living, what's the salary, so that you can make sure that, yes, this is someplace I really do want to try to work, that I can actually live in this town. Since they mentioned
Oh,
ahead.
I'm just going to say, Kate, that's a very important point because the position needs to be a good fit for you and for them. So it works both ways. So just do your research, and that should be evident in your cover letter too, that you talk to some of the reasons why the college would be a good fit for you.
Right. Since they mentioned people and culture on this, they're telling you to go to that people and culture website, but since culture and people seem to be an important thing, you might mention what is that what experience you have in this. And don't assume they know based on where you've been teaching. People who teach for us, apply to us, and they don't say, I teach a diverse student population because they assume we know. But I can't base it off of what I know about them. I have to base everything off of their letter and resume. So make sure you highlight what you do in those things. Make sure that piece of information in there, and then what you do for that part of your working.
So I just realized, Kate, that we never asked the participants to sort of give us a sense of who they are. So if you want to put in the chat something about yourself, like what part of the country you're from, if you're a student, a faculty member, that type of thing, that might help us cover some of the points that might be more relevant to you throughout the rest of our time together.
And if you also would put down if you're part-time or full-time, that also is of interest to us. Because that would also give us an idea if you have any full-time experience or just only part-time experience.
Or even if you are a graduate teaching assistant, that would be something that you could put as a part of your experience.
All right, so Allie is at Pima Community College.
Hi, Ellie. Hi, Angela.
Hi, Angela. And you're at Blim College, okay. Wonderful. So we have a lot of full-time people.
Yeah,
That's
hi,
great.
Hannah.
Hi, Hannah.
Hi, Trenton. Hi, Ryan. Uh, is it Vaibhav? My real thing is I hope that I did not get your name incorrect. I do like make sure that I actually get to know all of my students. And hi, Charla. Yeah, but if you noticed, Kate, are you okay if we move on with the
Yeah,
first quiz question?
yes, I'm just reading on kind of what they are, but you can go ahead and do that.
So if along with what you are putting in the chat, maybe if you have a guess on our quiz question here, then put your guess in the chat, and the first correct answer will get 5 points, but the points don't matter, which means I probably watched a little bit of Whose Line Is It Anyway, a little bit too much, but it is correct that sometimes a cover letter is also called a letter of application. So here is another question. Job applicants must send a cover letter blank before, when, or after sending their resume. So yes, so I see several of you when, so that is correct. So I will say though that the other day I did suggest to someone to do a cold call with with a certain situation, but in general the cover letter should go when you send your resume. So look, let's just move on unless you have any questions, but both of us will keep on monitoring the chat. So Kate, I'll turn it back to you.
Okay. So one thing I should mention is that when you apply for a job, at least at the community colleges, well, I've only worked at one community college, but all the other places I've dealt with, is that they basically take the position description and they create what's called a matrix. And from that, they look to see, they rate you based off of what's in the position description and how well did you address those things in your resume and your cover letter. And if you don't get high enough points, it was good that John used that point idea, because points are important. And if you don't get high enough points, you don't get the interview. And the interview is where you get to sell yourself. But you have to get that interview in the first place. So you really want to make sure that your cover letter contains everything you can. And that's why I suggest you read that position description and you address everything that's in that position description. If they want somebody who does things with technology, you highlight whatever technology you've done. And if you haven't done any technology, you highlight what things you can do or what you envision yourself doing. Very important, you don't do genetic cover letters. John and I were talking when we were getting ready to this, that we both have received cover letters where it's sent to the wrong college because they just forget to change the college name in their generic cover letter that they're sending out to everybody. And that isn't a really good sign that we want you to work for us and that you want to work for us. So make sure that you don't actually do a genetic cover letter. And now, when I say that, you're going to have similar things in all of them, but make sure you've read everything in your cover letter. Make sure it's addressing that specific position you want to apply for. And each one's a little different. Like I said, we all have our own personality. And so you might want to have some information in there that that fits just that community college and doesn't fit any other. So make sure you kind of think about that. Again, it says not to restate your resume, but I would highlight things that are important in this. If you are teaching a new course that nobody else has taught or you haven't ever taught, you might want to highlight what you were doing with that course. It'll be on your resume or your CV, but it should also be highlighted in your cover letter.
So I agree with that. Absolutely, Kate. And what I actually thought of here is a little activity that you might want to think about yourself at some point, and I'm sure that we'll make these slides available so that you can have all of the links. But if you are not sure about what things you could highlight in your cover letters, sometimes looking at a list of action verbs or a transferable skills list could help jog your memory of some things that you've done that you might want to highlight. And so this is a list that I was able to find. I actually have a different list in front of me, but it's I have a paper copy of it. So I found a similar list online. And so if you want to highlight your communication skills, which might be something that you definitely want to highlight for a faculty position, then these are some words that you might want to use. I think explaining and how you were able to explain a sticky situation to a student when you were a tutor, that might be something to highlight. Or your writing skills, if you happen to be like a newsletter editor or something at some point, that might be something to highlight. But looking at these types of things really might at times help to jog your memory.
So John, go back up to the top of that for just a moment, because I want to point out something. Under human resource relations, it has advising. And even though some schools don't have faculty do advising, some schools do have faculty do advising. So again, if advising is something you've done, put that down, even if it's been informal advising. That would be a skill you could definitely highlight on and put in there. So those are things to think about, is what else the skills do you have that may not be teaching related, but may be other related.
And I will say that even training skills might be useful in terms of if you have to, in a full-time position, write instructions that an adjunct instructor might need to follow in the future, or just even being able to be clear on instructions that you give your own students, and some evidence that you would be able to do that in a more concrete way would be helpful. So, oops. So I'll turn it back over to you, Kate.
Okay. So first up, what should it create? What should you contain in your cover letter? Make sure you have a polite greeting. Make sure you start off saying, usually I address mine. I think we have somewhere a little bit later about how to address it, but usually I address it to the whole position selection committee and say, dear whatever position, mathematics selection committee at this school. Make sure your name is somewhere on there, because I've actually seen some cover letters where I don't get a name on that. And make sure your contact information in there, and so that in case your resume and your cover letter get separated, they can have that information. This is one that John and I were talking about. If you happen to have a hotgirl.@gmail.com email address, I would change that. I would get a professional email address that you can use, that you can put on there, that would be useful for other people to see. So you want to have one that somebody doesn't go, wow, I'm not so sure about this person, if that's their email address. So just make sure that Google, you can get free Google email addresses. So I would, at least for this, I would get one, even if it's just where you only have these going. And again, don't assume the committee knows you or your experience. So I saw one person is trying to get a job at Pima Community College, and you right now work at Pima Community College. Don't assume that they know who you are just because you work with them. Give them an idea of who you are in this. They pretend they don't know you. You need to pretend you don't know them. So put everything in here that you can put in there to really give an idea of what's happening. The other thing is that, remember, this is not an industry position. You're a position in academia, which is a very different position. You're about collaboration. You're about teaching and working with students. You're about working with others in your department. Highlight those kind of skills. Also, if you're applying to a community college, most likely you're not going to be doing research. So if you were to highlight the research you've done in your master's degree or your doctorate degree, most community colleges wouldn't really find that be something that they would look at. That wouldn't be something that would get you points on the matrix thing.
So, yeah, I absolutely agree with everything Kate said. And I remember reading one application that somebody described their work at a previous position as, I picked stuff up and put it down. I don't think that's really the type of thing that you would want to say in an application or a cover letter, but using some of the more descriptive words that we talked about earlier would be helpful. And so since these slides will be available to you later, I did include these extra tips on ways you can make a connection, but I know our time is limited, Kate, so I thought that we could move it forward to what makes up a cover letter. And
Okay.
so I know that we'll be talking in the next few slides about formatting. And this is important because I thought about this the other day, Kate, that this applies even to cover letters sent via email. So even if you send the cover letter directly in an email and not attached as a PDF, it should still be formal. And as Kate mentioned, there are ways to address the cover letter appropriately, and then we'll talk about what goes in each of the paragraphs. So one of the things Kate mentioned already is that dear committee members might be a better way to address the cover letter if you can't find out exactly who will be reading it, rather than whom it may concern, or dear sir, or any gender biased phrases such as that. So dear committee members is a fairly safe bet. But Kate, do you have any other tips there?
So if you know who the chair of that committee is, you could write and address it just to that chair. But then I feel like the rest of the committee doesn't feel like you were addressing it to all of them. So even if you know who the chair is, I prefer to see it come in to dear committee members or dear selection committee member or something like that with the position in there so that somebody actually understands that you're writing it to the whole committee and not just that one person. But others actually kind of like to see it come to just the one person because then you've checked and you know who that person is. And it looks less generic if you address it to the actual chair of the committee. If you can find that out. Sometimes you can't find out who the chair of the committee is.
Well, you know what, Kate? The one that drives me nuts a little bit is dear HR director. I get
Yeah.
that sometimes as well, and I know that based off of some advice, yes, the HR director might be who is intaking the cover letters, but that's not who you should be trying to impress if you want to get the position.
Yeah, the HR director is not the person going to be reading it. And the rest of us would feel like, oh, they don't even know who they're applying to. So one of the things that we talked about is what should be on there. Traditional business formatting is really nice. Having your address information right at the top, and having the person you're applying to at the top, then the date, and then your information, is really a good idea. You should also have I think your email address should be on here also. Personally, I think that would be a good thing to have. So your name, your address, your email address, or your phone number would be good to have on here. The date, so you know when it did it, and then who you're applying to should come next. And then your dear whomever. And then we kind of look at, you should have an introductory paragraph, body paragraphs, and closing paragraphs. And we're going to talk about what all of those are. And what they should look like in all those. And then you should have a salutation and your name. Even if you're doing this in an email, well, if you're doing an email, that's hard. But if you're doing on a PDF, make sure your signature gets in there.
Yes, that drives me nuts too, Kate. And I will also say that this particular person, you can see put their email address in the letter, but I agree with Kate that somewhere at the top is also good. But I will also point out about this particular one that it does look like it was crammed onto one page, and that's not necessary either.
Yeah, I
So
was going to say the same thing, John. It's not necessary to make it in one page. In academia, we actually look at cover letters could be 2 pages, and we understand that. So don't feel like you have to get it to a 1 page.
So
Thanks for bringing that.
Trenton asked a question, is signature as in a graphic of our written signature? And yes, I will say that that's perfectly fine. Digital signing is perfectly fine these days, but leaving it blank with nothing there at all is a little bit well, I find it especially odd because they left space for it here, but then crammed in and took out the extra spaces. Right, that might normally go in the address block closer to the top. So I will say we'll talk a little bit more about formatting in a minute, but I have another short quiz for you. So which of these date formats is best for a cover letter? So if you have a guess whether it's the first, second, or third, put it in the chat. So yes, so I see that there seems to be a consensus that's the first one. So I would definitely go with October 9, 2020 also. And
John, can I just mention that in this country we do the month, then the day, then the year. But European countries do day, month, year. And either one is fine as long as it's one of those two.
yes, so I think something such as
9 October 2020, not the 10/9/20. That doesn't work, but the 9 October 2020 would work just fine.
yes. And then your name should be blank at the top, in the middle, or at the bottom of the letter. So that is possibly a trick question, but yes, it maybe you do want to put your name somewhere in the middle so they don't forget who you are halfway through reading your letter. Who knows? But definitely at the top and the bottom of the letter. So then your cover letter can summarize a key selling point such as your work history, medical history, or relevant experience. So put what you think in the chat. Yes, definitely relevant experience, but if you have any highlights of your work history that you would like to expand on in your cover letter, that would be great, as we've said before. So
And one of the other things about that is that if you happen to have had a break in your employment, the cover letter is where you would explain that. So that's also something you could put in there, is if you took some time off and you aren't working right now, but you have the experience, you would explain that here.
So Kate, I'll turn it back over to you.
Okay. All right. So again, you should have your address, your name, your address. Again, I like to put my email address right there because, or my phone number there, because I don't want to have the person have to go looking for it in the letter. If it's right at the top, I know where it is. I can put it at the bottom too, but at the top, I know exactly where it is. I see it all the time. The date right underneath it. And then put in as much as you can of this person that you're applying to. And if you don't know who the chair of the committee is, do not address it to the HR director. As John said earlier, address it to just the selection committee at, and then the community college or the college you're applying to and the address of that college. So I would, if you don't actually have a name, if you don't know who Jane Smith is, if you don't know who that person is you should be applying to, just put it as selection committee. And put it as what position. It's a mathematics selection committee, or it's whatever position you're trying to apply for. And then your dear, and then again, I would prefer to use, personally for me, I prefer to use the whole committee, because you are applying for the whole committee to look at. Not one person, it's a committee that picks you. And then we look at paragraph by paragraph of what has to be in there. So in your opening paragraph, you should really be telling people what position are you applying for. and how you heard about it. If you happen to know somebody at the college, great. Though again, that's not always the case. But you should talk about how'd you hear about it. But first up, I read sometimes, and I don't know who position it is. And again, make sure that this is not generic. So I've actually had somebody one time who wrote, I'm applying for this position, and the position was the position in um the position in at I think it actually said Scottsdale Community College, and I work at Coconino Community College. So that didn't do much for me. So make sure you have exactly which position you have and who they actually are. Then so that's kind of just the thing of why do you want to do it? This is kind of your hook of who you are, why you're here.
Oh, and I will say, Kate, when we were talking about this and planning for this webinar, we also mentioned that you might also want to just say what your 5 to 10-year goals are.
That's right.
And so that's something else that you might want to include in that opening paragraph there.
Yes. And I will let you know, because I've seen this a lot, that people will sit there and say, well, I want to go teach calculuses. Well, at my school, we have 6 full-time faculty at the moment. And we all teach the calculuses. So telling me you want to teach calculus isn't necessarily what we want, especially if you're doing a community college that teaches mostly developmental and liberal arts math. So don't say, I want to teach this class, because that's not also a good idea. So this opening paragraph is really the paragraph we use to get people to understand why we're here and who we are and who this person is who's applying. And then comes the middle paragraphs. The middle paragraphs, and there can be more than one of these. There should be more than one of these. This is where you're talking about your skills, your qualifications, what have you been teaching, what have you been doing besides teaching? If you've been on committees at your school, highlight those committees you've been on, because a lot of community colleges have multiple committees that they have their faculty on, and we want to know, are you involved in the school that you're working in right now? Let us know, are you been full-time, part-time, what experience have you had? Make sure again you are writing to that position description. That one we just looked at had every single course in their curriculum. So again, you don't want to specify I only want to teach statistics. You want to specify I can teach anything. I do teach statistics, but I also can teach every other class. So you really want them to know that. That being said, if you can teach statistics and you have experience in teaching statistics, put that in your cover letter, because there's a lot of people who don't have that experience, and that's something we need to see. If you've taught data science, put that in there, because that'd be great. John?
Well, and I will say, Kate, another one that at my college, at least, is the math for teachers courses. Those are another set of courses where we have historically had a hard time finding people to teach those classes. And the newest full-time faculty member in my department actually specializes in teaching those courses. And so in his cover letter, he talked about that, and that was part of our draw to invite him for an interview, and it ended up working out well for him. And so including things about what you specialize in, even if it's like some piece of technology or even if it's using inquiry-based learning or IBL techniques in the classroom, anything like that would be helpful. And so we have a question, Kate.
Yeah, so Trenton, I was going to address that. Trenton, what we talk about with getting full-time jobs is a lot about getting adjunct jobs. We also want our adjuncts that are able to teach multiple classes. We want our adjuncts that have experience with diverse student population. If you have, in fact, taught students that have a disability, highlight that, because that's something we want to see. Saying in your cover letter, if you're looking for an adjunct faculty position, hey, I'm willing to teach at any level that you need me to. Also, that's a very good thing to put in there. I'm putting in that you are willing to learn from the faculty, the full-time faculty. That's the thing we want to see, because that tells me that you're willing to actually be involved in and understanding what the faculty are talking about and learning from us. So highlighting, even if it's just an adjunct position, I think you still do a lot of the very similar things that you want to highlight.
So, oh, sorry, Kate.
Go ahead. No.
So Trenton, excuse me, in terms of getting your foot in the door specifically, I know that a lot of the online application systems are just something where you feel like you upload your cover letter and then it goes into a big black box somewhere and then you don't know if it comes out the other side. So it isn't a bad idea to, if you can find out who the department chair is, write them a letter or an email and let them know that you applied so that they can be on the lookout for your cover letter and resume in the system when an adjunct is needed. And another thing that really helped me was just networking. And so I made some connections at the Mishmatic conference, which is an AMATIC affiliate conference. So if there are any local conferences to you, then if you haven't attended them yet, that might be a place to go to network. And then that's something that you could write about in your cover letter also, is your involvement in those organizations.
That's a great thing. And also, if you're near that campus that you've applied for, if you can actually walk in and go talk to the person in person, sometimes that's also very valuable. And then also make sure, like, my school won't take applications unless there actually is a call for an adjunct. So make sure your school is actually called for an adjunct that you're applying for, because otherwise it will just sit there and nobody will look at it. But so make sure you're applying for a very specific position. If you see one up, whether it's adjunct or full-time, make sure that you've talked to if you're an adjunct person, a lot of times, we're looking for adjuncts. I'm just became the lead faculty of math and accounting, and I'm looking for people to teach for me all the time. I like when I can find somebody who will come in, and I'm looking through those applications. So if I know ahead of time that you're there, that's really very helpful. So I would email the person, go in and talk to them in person, call them on the phone if you need to. That's also a good idea.
But I also will say though that sometimes like timing is everything. And so I will say, if you have a specific place that you are trying to teach at as an adjunct, that you look at their course offerings and you have an idea of which courses you might be able and willing to teach. And right before the semester starts, maybe a week or two beforehand, that might be a good time to follow up, because there might be a last minute need for an adjunct before the new semester starts.
And I'll second that with what John just said, because sometimes we have faculty members who are going to teach for us, and then they got another job teaching somewhere else, and they stop teaching for us, and now we have classes and students and no teacher, and we have a week or two to hire somebody. So it's not the best situation for you as an adjunct faculty member to come in with a week or two before classes started, but it will definitely get you, most likely if you show up and we're looking for somebody, we would probably hire you at that point.
Yes, and I do hope that, if in your first adjunct position that you get at least like a week or two notice, because I remember my first position, and I found out that I would be teaching a class starting on a Monday, Saturday afternoon right before. So I had less than 48 hours to prepare. So it really, like I said, timing is everything in a way. So catch the person that you need to catch at the right time.
So Trenton, your next question, I want to let you know that when I went to grad school, I had um only 1 year. I had a full year of experience teaching grad school because my first year in grad school, I worked somewhere else and I didn't need to be a teaching assistant. I became a teaching assistant in my second year of grad school. So I only had 1 year of teaching experience, and um I my luck was is that I had a community college, brand new community college that just started in my community. So I was able to go to them and they needed people because they were brand new. I also went to my university I just graduated from and asked them if I could get a teaching, an adjunct job with them because they knew who I was. But then you also want to put down, hey, what did you do as a grad student? Did you work with others as a grad student? Were you involved with those other students and saying, what kind of collaboration did you use? Because that's one of the other things we look for in our faculty is that they want to collaborate with us. It's not, you're not teaching at a college and just being by yourself. You're all working together. And so if you can point out to them, I may not have a lot of teaching experience, but I've done this and this. I've done some tutoring here. I've informally tutored people. I've given advice to some to other colleagues and other students. Those kind of things are things you can actually highlight that will get you something to look at. And
Yes.
then look at those situations. Yeah. Go ahead.
Oh, yeah. So I concur with Kate, and I'll say that the tutoring experience is definitely something that sometimes people don't feel like they value enough personally to highlight, but I believe that it does help to highlight tutoring experiences, and also even like I was mentioning before about attending a local conference, if you can, if I see that personally when I'm reading a cover letter or an application, I think to myself, well, that's somebody who is like willing to go out there and maybe learn something new that they could bring back to the department as knowledge. So I do think that all of those are great things.
And to go on that idea, the other thing that's also nice about going to a local affiliates conference is that you also get to meet people and then they get to know you and they see you, and that's also a plus of having that information. So the last thing is once you've finished up your middle paragraphs, and again, we're not talking one pager anymore. We're talking 1 to 2 pages is fine. You don't want to be so long that people stop reading it, but you don't want to be so short there's not enough information in there. But then at the end, you actually formally close it. You say, here's why I think I'd be a great person at your school. This is why I'm interested in your job. And if you need anything more from me, please contact me again and give your contact information again at that point. And then thank them very much for their time in reviewing your application.
Yes, and I do think that making sure that you just thank the committee is very important. I think it just sets the right tone.
Yeah. And again, that tone is, are they willing to work with you? Are you actually willing to collaborate? And so having that tone of ending it and saying thank you, it says that you appreciate and you know that they're busy. And that's something to look at.
Oh, so I guess Kate, we have another quiz question. So which topic isn't normally mentioned in a cover letter? Yes, I see
Yes.
salary. So
I'm seeing
so
yes.
yes, so salary, definitely don't mention that in the cover letter, but I will say that it usually isn't that difficult to find out what it at least the salary range would be on the institution's website or in the job posting.
And I will reiterate that that you should know what your salary is, and you should know what the cost of living is there, because we actually have had a lot of people that apply to my college, and then they find out what the cost of living is in Flagstaff, and they find out what the salary is, and then they go through the whole process, and we interview them, and we spend all this time with them, and they turn us down. And that wastes our time and your time. So make sure you've looked at that beforehand. Did you know that this is actually something you want?
And our next quiz is cover letters often begin with the applicant explaining how they began their education, spend their free time, or found out about the job. Yes, found out about the job. I think if you started out with one of the other two, then that that might lead you to a dead end right there.
But I will mention a couple things. Is one is tell us how you spend your free time somewhere in the body isn't a bad
Yes.
idea. So we know that you're well rounded. And also a friend of mine, she actually told me that when she was in like 4th or 5th grade, she decided she wanted to teach mathematics at a community college. Well, that would be something. And by the way, she does now teach mathematics at a community college. So that would be something to put in the cover letter, that you've been wanting to do this job since you were in whatever grade you were in.
Yes, and I actually believe that those are all great things to have in there, but maybe not necessarily
beginning.
leading off with that.
Yes.
So I do think that it is important to, as one of the previous I'd said, like name drop if you happen to have somebody who you know at the institution that you're applying at, and that a few things about how you spend your free time could be helpful. Like maybe it is, like I mentioned earlier, that you spend some of your time attending a conference in your free time, or you actually have a hobby that would help you relate better to your students. So those are all great things to highlight.
All right. So your salutation should be your full name. It should be typed and then it should be signed. And again, it should say something like, thank you so much, or I appreciate your time, something that's kind of a salutation that you say first, and then your name nicely typed. My name is Catherine Kozak. That's usually how I sign everything, is with my formal name of Catherine Kozak and not with my Kate Kozak. So that's the other thing to think about. All right, some things to remember is the topics are why you, why them, why are you trying to do this, why are you getting into this. You should put in highlight your experiences, showcase why you're the best candidate. You should be a narrative, should match the tone of the institution and be professional. So use the same font throughout. I'm one of the bad people about this because I don't notice my fonts are different, but other people do notice that. So make sure that right before you send it, right before you print it, copy it, highlight it all, and make it all one font, just to make sure that that's the last thing you do, because you don't notice that it's changed. 2 to 3 pages is good, and about 3 to 5 paragraphs is great. Longer than 3 pages, people won't read it.
In case, I know that we mentioned this when we talked before, and using colors in the cover letter, it is not a good idea. So stick with black and white. And then we talked about your professional email address, but also the naming of your file is important as well. So make sure that your name is in the file name of the cover letter, so that if your letter gets separated from your resume and your application, then it will still get where it should go, hopefully. And I will say that one time I did see somebody who remembered to update the name of the college in their cover letter, but the wrong college name was in the file name. So that's also something that can get you if you're not paying close enough attention.
Yeah, and realize that when you apply nowadays for colleges, it's all done online. You submit everything online. So we will see that file name. We will see all that information because that's what comes into us. And again, make sure you customized it, tailorized it for your actual position you're trying to apply for. Make sure that you read through it. And I think the next slide is
Yeah,
yes.
so we'll skip to the last slide here. The other two slides, if you want to like take a look when you get the slide deck and go through and think for yourself what are some good and bad highlights of some example cover letters, you can do that as well. But
So attention to detail, make sure you look at it, make sure you read through things, read it out loud, read it to somebody else sometimes, or have somebody else read it. That always is helpful. Make sure somebody else reads it and says, yeah, I understand this, or this part isn't as clear. Whenever I apply for something or write a letter of recommendation, I always have somebody else read it for me to see if it makes sense. Make sure it's your style and not somebody else's style. Make sure it flows okay. This is a bad one. Make sure your spelling and punctuation are correct, because I've had so many where the spelling and punctuation is not. In this day and age with spell check, it shouldn't be that hard to do. When we say attention to detail, if you hadn't noticed, when we actually wrote about this webinar, the webinar announcement actually had a mistake in it. So read through it, make sure everything makes sense, make sure things are not, make sure you don't have any glaring mistakes in there. And make sure that you've addressed the position description. One final check, make sure look at all of those things and say, yes, I see that here, I see that here, I see that here. Because that is how you will get the interview, is by having this match the position description. Even for an adjunct, by the way, we still want to know, do you match up with what we want to say?
And Kate, I'll say that I've even had somebody spell my name incorrectly on their cover letter. So that is something where, you know what, if you don't get the person's name correct that you are addressing the cover letter to, then the rest of it might not matter. So just double check and make sure that you have went through all of these proofreading tips. So
yes.
I did have an announcement that I saw before we end and take questions here, but I saw this in a email thread that I'm in, and it's a graduate students and teaching conference. And so if you are interested in maybe presenting or attending, then you can visit that website right there. But otherwise, I want to thank you all for attending, and I'll turn it back over to Kate.
All right, so Oscar asked the question, there are other webinars like this. We actually did a webinar, it's a couple years old, but it's still very relevant, on what does getting a job at a community college look like. We probably will, so there's one on the Project Gains website. And so if you go to the AMATIC website, John, if you can put that in the chat, go to the AMATIC website and then go to Project Gains. There'll be a listing about that webinar in there. And then there's also there'll be other ones probably. We're working right now. She did one last year also on how to write your teaching philosophy. So that's a really important thing, because a lot of schools want to see your teaching philosophy when you apply for jobs. And we had another one. I think we did some other ones on how to get jobs also. So look through those, and I'm sure there'll be more that we'll be doing in the near future. You're welcome.
Yes, thank you again, everyone. I I just really am happy that we were able to answer some of your questions today.
Yeah, does anybody else have any other questions? And our emails are here, by the way, so you are more than welcome to email us a question that comes up later and says, you know, I want to look at this, and what do I want to do? And we're more than welcome to answer your questions if you want to ask later on also. So make sure you take down our email addresses, and we're always very open to anybody asking us questions. Are there any other questions? Thank you so much for attending, and I really hope that you get a job from this and you get where you want to be, because this is what we all want to do. I got my dream job, and I would love you to all have your dream jobs. And even if you don't get it right away, take another job, and that helps you to have experience at other places. So keep working on it. And being an adjunct, and I'm sorry that Trenton, you can't get a job as an adjunct, because I know in our area we're always looking for adjuncts. But thank you all for coming. We'll put the recording also of this also on the same Project Gains website. Laura, did you want to say anything?
No, because I only heard the last 20 minutes. Just thank you for coming. And yes, we're hoping to offer more webinars in the future.
Laura is the current president of AMATIC. She's right now at a conference, but she was able to attend for a short time of this. So thank you, Laura, for showing up. Thank you all, and let me know how things go with you. We'd love to know. I'll stop recording.